Hello. Before we get into decisions about technology, let's spend a little time about how we make decisions about anything in a school setting. I'm going to focus primarily on the level of principal because that's where most of the action takes place at the school level. I'm using a model that was developed by a mentor of mine. Um, and my role with him was to adapt it to school settings. So this model is now adapted specifically for use in our course. So let's begin. How we make decisions. Decisions are usually made, again, in a school setting, decisions are usually made on the basis of two factors. Again, I'm speaking of the principal now. Um, so if I'm the principal, and I'll use myself as an example, instead of the cumbersome he, she designations, I use the first person pronoun. If I'm the principal, I generally have two concerns in making decisions. One is the concern for control, which we can list on a horizontal axis from 0 to whatever, low to high. The other concern I would have is the concern for approval. I like I want people to like me. I want the faculty to like me. There's nothing wrong with that. So we're going to compare the levels of concern for control and concern for approval that I have as a principal. And the extent to which I mix those two concerns, I will develop a leadership approach that enables me to communicate, to manage disagreement, to have a wholesome or negative approach to authority and to participation. And how I choose to function will determine in large part the trust that I can um, uh, portray to the teachers under my supervision. And the whole thing, to be a little philosophical, is a search for truth. So let's take a look at the different approaches. So let's assume for a moment that I am your principal. Suppose that I have, as your principal, a low concern for control and a low concern for approval. I often compare this to a principal who has been around for a while and just wants to hang on to retirement. And we know that I have probably retired even though I'm still working. Um, so this is avoidance behavior. I'm there, I'm present, and I interact, but my approach to communication is minimal. I try to stay away from disagreement and just let teachers deal with things the way they want to. I really don't look at authority in a positive manner at all. Um, I am in favor of limited participation. Therefore, the trust that I generate in my faculty tends to be minimal, and the search for truth or whatever we have to really truly accomplish is very elusive. Here's another approach. Suppose I'm your principal and I have a high concern for approval and a low concern for control. In other words, I want to be a popular guy with my faculty. I mean, that's my motivation. I want my teachers to like me. And if they like me, then they'll do what they're supposed to do. Um, my approach to communication is to agree with everything, tell everyone what they want to hear, um, which is dangerous because that can cause disagreement. If one teacher has a problem and wants to hear something, that's how I'll respond. Yet another teacher will come in with the same problem and I'll respond differently. Therefore, it can really spawn disagreement within a faculty. My approach to authority is I will support everything that you want. I will just be a really nice guy and I will have as much participation as possible. We're going to have faculty meetings all the time, and it's going to generate a whole lot of participation. What I'm thinking, therefore, is that the more participation, the better. Actually, that leads to indecisiveness on my part if I'm the principal. Let's move on. Yeah, this is different. Now, if I'm your principal, I have a high concern for control and a low concern for approval. In other words, I'm not here to be liked or popular. I'm here to run this school. And I will communicate top down. I will issue memos. I will conduct my own faculty meetings, which are mostly monologues on my part. I will stifle disagreement. I will use my authority. I will limit participation because I'm afraid that I will lose control. Therefore, again, trust is lost in this process. But now we come to splitting the difference. Medium concern for control, medium concern for approval. This leads to compromise. Let's split the difference. And yes, we will vote. Okay. But here's what happens when we have an issue, say around technology, and the hot button issue sometimes what devices are we going to purchase? Are we going to purchase PCs or Macs or tablets or iPads or whatever? Let's vote. And if there are 35 teachers on the faculty and one side wins by 2 votes, that's what we'll do. And then, of course, disagreement sets in, and we never really reach a consensus. Um, we may have a majority decision, but the problem is far from resolved. And again, I'll try. Well, let's do a new vote, but maybe then it's too late. So the participation becomes very troublesome because it tends to be in disagreement. And again, the trust level is not that high because of the uncertainty of back and forth decision making. So let's move on. Now, if I'm your principal and I have a high level of concern for control and a high level of concern for approval, then I'm able to integrate my work with the work of my faculty. Now, there's nothing wrong with high control and high approval. Both are fine as long as they're used in conjunction with each other and not one at the expense of the other. And that's what this matrix tries to convey. So if I am your principal and I really try to integrate our ideas, say about technology, then I will establish a climate in the school that is open communication. Disagreements are welcome and they're not stifled, but they're dealt with in depth. And I'm able to separate authority into two types, authoritative and authoritarian. Um, the authority is shared in an authoritative manner because you, as the teachers on my staff, and I are all authoritative in different ways. In other words, because of what we know and our experiences. So we speak with authority. That's different from speaking from an authoritarian point of view. Authoritarian point of view, remember, is down in that lower right hand corner where I am the authority and you are not. And that comes from the bottom up as well. I mean, some teachers function that way with their principal. Um, so, in a leadership role as a principal, my role is to establish healthy, wholesome communication, to welcome disagreement, to enable all of us to speak authoritatively and not in an authoritarian manner, enable participation by addressing issues, not persons. There's a ground rule I always use with my faculty, triple C, CCC, comfort, clarification, confrontation. So when we have a disagreement, we need to be concerned with each other's comfort, and we need to ask for clarification. And then we confront the issue and not the person. This is what leads to high trust when within a faculty, a community can develop that appreciates this kind of communication and teamwork that leads to consensus. Consensus is far better than compromise. As a matter of fact, if you take a good dictionary and look up the word compromise, you'll find 3 negative definitions and 2 positive definitions. Consensus, on the other hand, does not necessarily mean unanimity, but it means enough support to take the next step. So if we're dealing with technology of some type, um, and we may take a vote periodically, and if the consensus is maybe 65, 70, 75, 80%, then that's enough to move on, to move forward. And that's the most difficult environment to create for a principal to create. So now let's see what happens when we focus not only on the principal, but when we put the faculty into this mix. Whoa, now we have everyone. and and communication is easy. You find the principal and I'm by myself. Um, but the minute we add all these players into the scenario, then we have a much more complicated situation. Let's take a look then. Notice the 4 P's that I have down at the bottom. And let's talk about how we might make decisions about technology. The P stands for principle. So some decisions can be made by the principal in concert with all faculty members. This happens at a faculty meeting, group meetings. And the next one is principal to some. When I was a high school principal years ago, I worked very closely with my department heads, and they reflected the decisions of some of their team members. So this was a team that was part of the larger team. So that's one to some. Then there are always principal to one. It's just some decisions I need to make. For example, if again, we're talking about technology decisions, and I have to present a budget, and we began by getting data from all, principal to all. Then we went principal to some to try to narrow things down a little bit. And then here I am by myself as a principal working with a superintendent or a school board or some other entity that actually has more authority than I have over the budget. Sometimes I just need to have the freedom to make some on the spot decisions based on what we've done at the principal to all and principal to some levels. And finally, there is principal to none. Sometimes I just need to make decisions as a principal. So when these 4 approaches are used in concert with each other, there's a high level of trust, and the search for truth, or whatever truth is, works well. The FDLE is a little formula I use called facts, data, logic, and empathy. Not sympathy, empathy. So let's play with this a little bit. Here's the principle. Remember, if the principal is basically uses, if I use an avoidance style, it really chaos within the faculty. On the other hand, if I say whatever, hey, whatever you folks want, that's what I'll support. I'll end up having to support something to my supervisors that is probably way out of the budgetary limitations, and I just can't do it. Um, if I'm down here, then I'll do the planning, thank you, and I will let you know what we're going to use for technology. Splitting the difference can be seen in so many ways. But if I try to function up here, then we have this other principle to all, principle to some, principle to one, principle to none. That is a good working situation. And that's really, as we work through this course, keep this in mind, because this is really the kind of approach that as a principal or a future principal or education leader, even maybe a team leader, uh, maybe it's not necessarily about boss. Boss has a connotation of here. Although some people can use the word boss here with a high level of respect. Um, so again, someone needs to be the leader. So this is what this model looks like. And the goal, of course, is to get the total faculty to work together as a cohesive unit in the upper right-hand corner of this matrix or grid. That is legitimate teamwork, where some decisions are made with the whole group, some are made by a smaller subgroup, department heads working with their departments, the principal working with department heads. Sometimes the leader just needs to bite the bullet and make the decision alone, depending on what the decision is. And there's a whole formula for that as well, but we don't have time to do that. And sometimes the leader just needs to make the decision. So I hope this is helpful. We'll use it as we work our way through the course. Um, going to have going to have a little discussion forum on this uh, PowerPoint video. So you might want to view it a couple of three times, because I've so far, okay, it's taken 18 minutes, and I've really condensed a whole lot of theory into a relatively short time. Hope you find it helpful. See you online.